Good morning and welcome to Ed's World, where it's always morning, even in the afternoon. I am your host, Jay Edgar, and I have a returning guest today. One of my favorites, of course, JJ Leahy is coming back to talk about the issues of the week. Welcome to Ed's World, JJ.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ed. I'm glad to be back on here. Had a blast last time.
Before we get started, I want to talk about what we saw last night, the active situation that was going on while Beauty and the Beta was on the air, and that is the fact that there was yet another shooting in this country, this time in California. Now, I haven't seen a lot on the news about any of this, so I'm not 100% sure why this is not going on. This might have fit the narrative. I don't even know what happened there, but what I do know is that celebrities have jumped out again to try and pass more legislation in places like Michigan and Wisconsin to try and solve a problem that happened in California where all of these legislations are already in place. So I don't know what it is that they want to accomplish with this, but this is going the completely wrong way. What did you see on this? Do you know anything more than I do?
I don't know a lot more than you. I do know that the latest news I heard, and this isn't confirmed, but someone said that the weapon used was an AK-47 that was purchased legally in Nevada, I believe. If that's true, there's definitely a conversation to be had around that. But what you're pointing out is true that this shooting, along with a bunch of others, they keep happening in these gun-free zones.
Mm-hmm.
Where the policies that people are trying to put in place are already exist, and it's hard to make any kind of a case that pushing for more extreme versions of these policies are going to stop any future shootings like this. But I don't have a lot to say on this shooting, partially because we don't have a lot of information yet on what happened, and so I definitely tried to avoid speaking too early and conjecturing about incidents like this. But my heart definitely goes out to the victims and the families that were affected, and it is really heartbreaking. It's just yeah, there's a lot of evil and sickness in the world, and it definitely breaks your heart.
It does, but the other side of the coin is this happened in California where all these restrictive laws are. This doesn't happen in our two states where there's less restriction, unless it happens in either Milwaukee or Detroit, in which case it doesn't get reported to the statistics because it's gang violence and it falls under a different statistic.
Well, statistics are racist now. You can't report on those.
Well, we've got a full show tonight. I do want to make one quick announcement here, and that is I have started writing the script for my civics review, so look for that coming in the near future. I think I'm going to start doing. That's going to be a bi-weekly thing because there's going to be a lot of production there. It's going to be a longer video, and I just don't think I'm going to be able to muster the time to do one episode a week. But we're going to start by talking about the Declaration of Independence, so look for that in the near future. We do have a full show tonight as usual because the news never stops. The first thing we'll be talking about, of course, is going to be the massive budget deal that the media forgot. Some of the things that are going on in the deal. I've actually read the full text of the act that went through the Congress, so we'll talk about that. Robert Mueller took the stand in the House of Representatives, so we'll talk a little bit about the news surrounding that and whether or not this changes anything for the news cycle, as we always do. And of course, because this is my guest's favorite topic from what I understand, we will be talking about the statistics surrounding 2020 and some of the stories that have surrounded the candidates. Erica
Yeah,
Thomas made a very large scene down in Georgia pertaining to an altercation that she had in the checkout line at the grocery store, and it wound up not being true. So we'll talk about that a little bit. The Nick Sandman case was dismissed late last week. We'll talk about why this happened and what could be going forward from this and what this could mean for protests going forward for the rest of us for the rest of time. And to close it all out, we will be talking about the anti manspreading chair that is making the rounds because public transportation just isn't comfortable enough, and we have to make it much more comfortable. It is going to be all of this and more on Ed's World. Thanks for subscribing and watching this on YouTube. Remember, if you like what you see, go ahead and hit that like button. As well, we are over on BitChute, so go ahead and hit that like button over there as well. If you're listening back to this on an audio platform later, thank you again. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. And if you're on iTunes, leave us that 5-star rating and a good review that helps us move up the charts. Ed's World is proudly partnered with the Freedom Scoop Media Group. We are holding open castings for writers, so we'll get some email information into the show at the end. And you can email me if you know a writer, if you're a writer yourself and you'd like to contribute. We'll get you a sample article and we can help build out the site. After the lengthy introduction, it's time to move on to the most important part of Ed's World. So, JJ, you've been here before. We've heard your bio, but for any new subscribers, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, my name is JJ Leahy. I am pretty active over on Twitter, where I am called the Mild Moderate, and deliver some mildly spicy takes on developing situations and various ridiculous pieces of news. I'm a young guy from the beautiful state of Michigan, surrounded by the Great Lakes. I'm getting married 1 year from now, about a year, T minus 2 days there. So excited about that. And I've been kind of active in the world of podcasting since I was 16 or 17. My dad and I started a podcast together called Man Cave Radio, and we did that for a year or two and just had a blast talking about guy topics, and just really loved it. And then did a couple shows about leadership and communication before I started to get invited on some different podcasts about my favorite topic, which is the wonderful, dirty world of politics. I have the most fun when I get to talk about polling numbers and presidential elections. That's definitely my sweet spot, and where I really get a big kick out of. So that's a little bit about me and what I do.
Well, and you've mentioned now that you did your own podcast before, but I'm kind of curious as to how you got onto the rounds and how you started to get noticed. I remember that I picked you up from listening to Brady Leonard's show, but how did you get into the rounds of getting to appear on other podcasts?
It really comes down to friendships, actually. Just talking on Twitter with different, political people like Brady. Just developing some good relationships with them and having a lot of good one-on-one conversations. And I think that's always been the most successful for me in the past is just developing personal friendships with people I actually like and have stuff in common with. I'm definitely just have always been attracted to the types that have a natural knack for shows like this. And so, you have enough fun talking to them off the air, and eventually they say, "Hey, this is such a good conversation. Why don't we at least record it?" And so that's kind of where things have gone for me in the past.
Well, that's awesome. And I do hope to pick your brain on some of the expertise on this politics related show because there is a lot going on this week. And starting with, as I mentioned in the introduction, we're going to be talking about the budget deal. House Resolution 3388 allocates $2 trillion in spending over 2 years. There was some backlash to this, of course, as soon as it came up, but it disappeared out of the news almost immediately. Did you get to read the House bill? I know I linked it when I did my solo video on it.
I haven't read it. I'll tell you this. The reason it's not news is because there's nothing that the government likes more, and that political elites on both sides of the aisle like more than spending more and spending more and spending more. And so, if talking about spending more is going to draw negative attention to that, they're going to shut up right away because um, both sides of the aisle they disagree about absolutely everything except the issue they come the closest on is one side says we need to spend all of it, and the other side says we should spend most of it. And this is just round two of the omnibus that we had, a little while ago. And Trump came out and said, "I'm never going to sign a bill like this ever again."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Yeah, fat chance. Let's revisit this in a year or 2 years."
And here we are.
I actually I had to go back the other day and look up some of my old tweets about the omnibus, and I actually deleted several of them because there was so much anger in them. I just, I'm a small government guy, and I'm frustrated at the amount of money that the IRS is already taking out of my pocket all the time, and I don't care about 90% of the things that we spend our money on here as a country, but we're just taking more and more out of my paycheck every time. So there's a lot of frustration that I have, every time they raise the debt ceiling. And this is, so Bush spent a crazy amount of money and, raised our debt ceiling super high.
Mm-hmm.
Obama smashed through that and took it way further. And, on the one hand, you could look at Trump and say, hey, we're not spending as fast as we did under Obama, but, we're still going in the wrong direction. And you reminded me before we started recording, of Trump's promise that we were going to pay off the national debt. And, we are totally going in the wrong direction there. And this is my number one biggest frustration with the Republican Party and with Donald Trump is that the spending it has not been reined in. It is as out of control as it's ever been, and it's not a priority for anybody except for maybe Rand Paul. That's about it.
Well, and that's the thing too. I remember when I was younger, and everybody was so happy about the fact that Bill Clinton balanced the budget. What was that in '95 or '96, whatever it was?
Yeah, Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton.
Yeah, they sat down and they balanced the budget. We had a budget, it was balanced, and we didn't spend over it. We actually got a surplus. We did start paying the debt down a little bit at the time. But yeah, Newt Gingrich was instrumental in that because, as we see from the Democrats now, there's a lot of spend, spend, spend going on there. But we haven't had a budget since Obama was in office, and it was only like his second year in office where we had a budget at all. So for the rest of time, we've had these incremental spending packages that just say, give us more money and we'll spend it as we see, instead of having something we can present to the American people as to what we're going to spend this money on. Why don't we have budgets anymore? That's the question we need to be asking our elected officials, I think.
I think people are really frustrated because this was what the Tea Party was supposed to be about. This is one of the biggest issues, when conservatives sent all the Tea Party candidates to Washington was we're fed up with these empty promises that Republican officials have made to us in the past. We're fed up with the spending. It needs to be turned around. That was one of the biggest issues that the Tea Party was even about. And nothing happened. You had some filibusters. You had a government shutdown, and then the debt marched onward, and we're still going further and further. And I think that I think it's really disheartening. I think that that is a big part of why there was such a huge lack of enthusiasm among conservative voters for Mitt Romney. Was everybody felt like that nothing was actually being done that was promised by Republican leaders. Mm-hmm. At least the Democrats don't hide the ball. They admit that they don't care about the debt, and that that their prioritization is on all their social programs that they need trillions of dollars for. Um, and the Republicans, on the other hand, are extremely two-faced about it, and they talk a big game about how the spending is one of the only things that matters to them. And the Washington swamp sucks everybody in, and as soon as they get there, all those priorities and those promises fly out the window. And so what where why would you expect the voters to have confidence in you and want to bring you back?
That's true. How do we get back to a point where we get to see what the budget is being spent on? That's been my biggest concern in the whole thing, and I brought it up once already because I mean, if you read the bill, and again, I did, it just says defense spending and non-defense spending, and both sides are equal. I mean, we don't know what's in the defense spending, we don't know what's in the non-defense spending. It's just give us the ability to spend this money over 2 years and let us rack up the debt as high as we want. There's no limit, there's no line, there's no nothing. It's just let us keep racking it up.
I've heard the proposal before that I really like, which is if the budget is not balanced, then Congress members, number one, can't get paid, and number
Who cares?
two are I'm sorry,
I said, who cares?
but number two, no, I'm saying this is the proposal, but number two, in this proposal is that if there's not a balanced budget, no member of Congress is eligible for reelection. I think that this could be a way that you could actually put some pressure on them with something they actually care about, which is maintaining their cushy jobs. If you could enact legislation like that, um, you give somebody enough motivation, and they'll actually fix the problem. The people in Congress absolutely can fix this problem. They just don't care to because there's no incentive to. The only incentive they have is to continue to spend so that they can come back to the people in their districts and say, look, here's how I'm helping you financially by providing these social programs.
And that's a big part of that too. Is a lot of this comes down to buying votes essentially.
Oh, you look at every single message from the presidential Democratic candidates right now. That all they're doing at the moment is rushing to out promise each other how much money they're going to give you. Listen, you can't vote for candidate A because they're only promising to give you, this much of a raise. I'm going to give you twice that much of a raise plus all this extra money. This is the only thing that they're fighting on now is, well, the other person is not being extreme enough in how much free money they're giving you. You take it all the way to I think Marianne Williamson has the most extreme proposal, which is the reparations. I don't see how you can get any closer to literally buying votes than saying, hey, if you're a person of color, I'm going to give you money if I'm in office. Like there's not, you cannot possibly get closer to just straight up admitting I'm buying votes.
Well, and buying votes is an interesting way to bring that too, because the Tuesday morning when this all came out, I was listening to Limbaugh because I knew this was all going to fall out of the news quickly, and I wanted to make sure that I had some information on it from some of the pundits. He was the only one that really talked about it. I think that might have been part of the strategy that Trump brought into this when he decided that yes, he is going to sign this and go forward, is the fact that we're going into an election year right now. We're not there yet, but we're already very strongly onto the election cycle. So we were either going to put the spending bill into place, which I think Pelosi had him by the nuts on that, or we're going to shut the government down. And I mean, yes, he rebounded after the government opened back up in popularity, but his numbers were in the tank during the shutdown. And I think that might be part of the reason that he decided to suspend his announcement that he was never going to sign another omnibus package and go forward it. I don't think it's right, but I think that's why he did it.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. It comes down to I just said a minute ago that the swamp of Washington sucks everybody in, and there is a vicious cycle of, in order to get reelected, you have to spend more money and give people more things. And as soon as your reelection is on the table, everything you ever said in the past or stood for in the past goes out the window.
It's a crying shame, but you're absolutely right, and that's the way that it all works. I mean, everybody in Washington is trying their hardest to get him out of office because a successful Trump presidency means that anybody like you or I could stand up and go and run. I mean, I could run for the first time in 2020 for president, but we don't
Wow,
necessarily.
I can't believe you're that old. You don't look old enough to run.
35.
Wow. Well, it is frustrating. I think that if I could get one message through to Trump, it's that I think a shutdown and standing up for the things that conservatives sent him and sent Tea Party candidates to Washington to do, those are worth it for two reasons. One, you see a lasting change in the direction that the country's going,
Mm-hmm.
and I would hope that these people who have dedicated their lives to trying to improve our country, I hope that that would be more important to them than reelection. And secondly, you're gonna I really think you would see a large increase in conservative voter enthusiasm if they're voting for a candidate who actually has stood their ground and done what they said they were going to do, and done what conservatives have been asking politicians to do for decades here. You're going to experience a little bit of a benefit from, temporarily, short term, from ending the shutdown. But that voter enthusiasm is gone. A lot of people who have not really been excited about voting recently are going to stay that way and
Mm-hmm.
continue to not care about your now empty promises. You Trump and Republicans are never going to actually get any love and support from the media, anyways. So why, in a situation like this, would you forget that and say, "Oh, but they're promising to love me if I end the shutdown right now. They're promising to stop making me look like the bad guy if I come in and save the day by ending the shutdown." What? Why? Why would you start believing that now? It's never been true in the past. Nobody who voted for you is going to be happy that you're doing this. And a lot of people who have been disillusioned and who decided to go ahead and vote for Trump in 2016, a lot of those people are going to go back to being disillusioned and say, well, not even Trump, who was like the most extreme candidate that anybody could find, not even he had the conviction to stick with his guns. So I'm disappointed because, and I was disappointed first, when he signed the omnibus. Disappointed again here because it's very off brand for him. He's always been the guy who it didn't matter all the negativity and the character attacks and the nonstop blasting by Democrats in the media. It didn't matter in the past. He went ahead and stuck by his guns anyways, and that that antagonism and the opposition, if anything, seemed to fuel him and make him stronger. And I guess I want that Trump back. Why? Find the spine that you had back then, pull it out of the closet, dust it off, put it to good work. Right here. Quit spending our money. let us keep our own money, please.
I want to touch on something quickly that I didn't put into the show notes, but I probably should have. But it does kind of relate a bit to this On Friday, we just had the decision passed down from the Supreme Court that Trump will be allowed to use military funding to build the wall. Now, he did just suddenly get himself a large amount of money allocated into military spending that has no earmarks to it. Can he use what's in this budget now? Since it has gone through Congress and passed the House, which is Democrat controlled, can he use this for wall funding? Is there a silver lining here?
I mean, it's possible. I would be surprised if the issue doesn't find its way into courts on some other angle as well. But you're also kind of asking the wrong guy here, because that's not a huge priority for me.
Right.
I am I for the wall? Yes. Am I for the wall at the expense of higher taxes? No.
I want to take a second and bring up one last thing, and that's actually going to be our transition to our next topic. Is do you think that Trump and Nancy, do you think he engineered this to the point where this was going to come out the day before Mueller was supposed to stand before the House? Do you think that was on purpose to try and pull this back out of the news? That was something I brought up in my solo video, and I can say yes and no to the idea of it, and I'm not really sure where I stand on it.
If it was someone other than Trump, I would say I don't think so. I think it's blind luck. One thing though that we know about Trump is that he is, as a reality TV star, he really has a knack for manipulating the media to talk about anything else. And he tweeted, what was it, yesterday? Was it yesterday or today that he was tweeting about Baltimore? I think it was today. He was tweeting about Baltimore.
Yesterday is when it started.
Okay. On the one hand, you're tempted to look at that and say, what an idiot. Why did you, you could have said almost the same thing and worded it in a very less controversial way. But at the same time, look, it's the only thing the media is talking about right now. And the Mueller thing and the budget thing have totally fallen off. The budget thing has really fallen off. Nobody's talking about that now. Yeah. You and I are one of the only people still talking about the budget now.
Yeah, it's been a snippet in everybody else's news cycle, but it's just disappeared.
If you haven't fully moved on to the Baltimore thing yet, you're still talking about the Mueller thing. So I think it's possible. I think it's more likely that his Baltimore tweets were an intentional distraction from the budget deal than the timing with the Mueller testimony. I think that's more likely. I would, if I were, just to try and bet some safe money, I would lean more toward Mueller being a coincidence, but not the tweets, not the Baltimore tweets. And in fact, the Baltimore tweets might also, may also have been trying to distract from the Mueller testimony a bit, because even though it really wasn't bad news, he is also really sick of people talking about Mueller and talking about Russia. Mm-hmm. And the investigation. He's definitely sick of people talking about that. And from what I've seen, every time people do talk about those issues, his poll numbers have suffered a bit.
Well, as you said, if you're not talking about Baltimore, which I didn't have on the schedule today, you're talking about Mueller. So let's talk about Mueller. On Wednesday, as soon as the budget deal was cleared out of the news, Robert Mueller stood in front of the House, which he assured us he was not going to do when he did his grand retirement speech, to answer questions to the House of Representatives about what was in the report. Now, the House of Representatives, many of its members came out and said that they are going to have Robert come up and talk to them because most of America didn't read the report. So it's very important for us to go ahead and get him up on the stand under oath to talk about these things. one of the grand disappointments to the entire hearing was the fact that Roberts said, I don't know, or referred to the report so much, but we got just a little bit of information out of this, including the fact that we don't think in this country now that Mueller did all that much work on his own report anymore. So I know you said off mic that you didn't see a lot of this, but what you said you got some, I don't know, secondhand knowledge out of this? Would that be the proper term?
I heard a couple of summaries. Ben Shapiro was one who talked about it. Um, here's someone made the comparison. So the House Democrats are saying people didn't care about the report and didn't read it. So we need to have him come in person and talk about it, and then hopefully we can get people outraged and listening to this and caring about this. So someone made the comparison. I believe I actually have the name here. Now I lost it. Someone made the comparison. Okay, people didn't care enough to read the book, but maybe they'll watch the movie. And then the problem is that the movie just was not very interesting because your main star in the movie, Robert Mueller, is absolutely as boring as oatmeal. And so the right there in the opening statement, we have a lot of the information that we need, which is Americans don't care about this. Americans largely know what was in there, which is some bad behavior by Trump, probably not really illegal, definitely not amounting to any of the treason charges that Democrats are swearing up and down are in there, including Adam Schiff, who, absolutely swears on 10 stacks of Bibles that he has insider knowledge that Trump, colluded with Russia. And it's pretty clear to most people of all political creeds that everything in this investigation is largely a nothing burger. There's not a lot there, and what is there is not very interesting. Does it make Trump look good? Absolutely not. But does anybody really care? No. We have another election here in essentially a year, and we're going to have a pretty good referendum for people to announce whether or not any of this trumped up Russia talk matters to them at all.
Well, that's part of the problem with, and they're trying to push this forward and get the Mueller report to go. They want this to be still hanging over the president's head going into the next election. But the other problem with that is I do think that there is some sort of enthusiasm to try and get the president removed before the next election so they can say that he didn't serve a full term. He wasn't qualified, he wasn't capable, and couldn't serve a full term. And I keep going back to the same idea of this is trying to keep people like you or I, people who could just stand up and say, you know what, I want to be president one day, and going on and actually pursuing that without getting embroiled into the swamp before we go into that. Or for those of us to go up and try and primary some of the people that are vulnerable that don't want to be primaried.
I think the far bigger crime committed by Trump in the eyes of Democrats is not being a political outsider. I think it's siding with the conservatives. That right there is the unforgivable sin. That's why they hate him so much. Is because he is a Republican and he opposes them.
Well, yeah, I mean he's a Manhattan Democrat socialite. He's definitely not a conservative like a Bush or a Romney or anything like that, but he chose, after rubbing elbows with all of these people for so long, to go and run with an R next to his name against the Queen herself.
I think there's a less than 0% chance that Trump is removed before the election. It's not going to happen, and I don't think they're even going to file any impeachment proceedings or start any actual hearings. And Adam Schiff, who has been one of the loudest proponents of Trump colluded, um, has kind of put one of the final nails in the coffin here by basically admitting that this isn't going to happen. And if you don't have Adam Schiff on board, you don't have anybody on board.
Hmm. I never thought to look. I did want to look at the voter roll for when they had the referendum to bring in the impeachment down to the debate floor. I wanted to see what the voter roll was to see who all voted for that and who voted against it because, I mean, Al Green got absolutely shellacked by that, but I never thought to actually try and put the names to it.
Well, I can try and pull it up here.
I bet there were some interesting people reaching across the aisle and going the other direction, though. I know Amash voted against Trump.
Yeah, he's he's a treat from my home state of Michigan. 95 voted no, which is to say vote for. It looks like this is saying 95. The 95 no votes were all Democrats, according to
Mm-hmm.
Vox.com. I don't, but Amash is no longer identifying as a Republican. He's an independent now. But it also says, Democratic. It doesn't say non-Republican. So, if we just take this at face value, it would look like Amash actually voted yes to table the measure. So, kind of interesting. I guess we don't have super solid numbers from this, but it kind of looks like it was pretty much kind of along party lines there, and not. I don't see anything here suggesting that any Republicans, which I think if you would have had one Republican voting no on this, I think that that'd be all you'd hear in the news for a week or two.
Well, I was more curious as to which Democrats decided to join the party to table this.
Yeah, it looks like 137 of them voted to table it, which is more than half of the Democrats.
Mm-hmm. Any big
Uh,
names or?
this article is not super useful.
It's
It talks
Vox. What do you
about
expect?
it talks about why they were trying to push it and which incidents were cited in the resolution.
He's mean.
Yeah, I'm not. Wait a minute. Oh, I think I have an article here that might be useful. Refresh this page here. All Republicans joined with 137 Democrats and the lone independent Justin Amash to table the resolution. So he did actually vote yes.
Well, getting back to the Mueller thing, does what happened on Wednesday, does that change anything in the perspectives that the Democrats have to try and push the impeachment thing?
I think that if anybody, we're far along enough in all this. I don't think that anyone's mind is going to be changed. You already either are convinced that Trump really did collude, in which case hearing Mueller's nothing of a testimony isn't going to change anything, or you don't care. And again, this isn't going to change anything. It was definitely an embarrassing ordeal, I think, for Democrats. There were not any bombshells revealed. And the fact that the media has really moved on from this pretty quickly, that definitely solidifies that they are embarrassed that they thought they really had something here. There's nothing here, which most people were not surprised about. And I think that the media is almost as ready to put this to bed as your average voter. The Mueller testimony in particular. I mean, not the collusion, not the whole investigation, because the impeachment threat is something that the media is absolutely still gaga about and salivating over. So don't misread me there. I'm speaking specifically about Mueller's testimony.
Well, I'm actually kind of drooling and salivating at the idea of an impeachment hearing myself because, I mean, that's all of my shows written right there for the next 6 months.
Well, and if they did that, I think there's a real chance that you burn out, what's left of the moderate voter base.
Hmm.
I think there's a real chance that enough of them say, "All right, screw it. I don't really care this year. I'm not voting for the Democrats." I think it's totally a realistic scenario. But at the same time, um, Trump's messaging about this, I think, really could be improved because he keeps selling himself as the victim and doing the whole, poor me routine, which is not an attractive look on anybody. And when he's built a reputation on being this counterpuncher and being the person who doesn't care about other people's feelings, I think to turn around and say, oh, the Democrats are being so mean to me and the media is being so mean to me, I don't think that wins him much favor with independents.
Well, my last question on this is do you think that there's a next step for the Democrat Party? Or do you think it's time for them to just walk away from all of this and focus their efforts on the clown car and the growing train wreck that they have for Democrat candidates going into 2020?
I would not be surprised to see more measures introduced to try and initiate impeachment hearings. Um, I definitely think we're starting to get to the point in the cycle, though, where it's going to be more interesting and more profitable for them to start talking up their own candidates instead of this, never-ending impeachment talk. But if Trump wins again, we get to start the whole thing over again with a whole fresh new investigation, a whole fresh set of riots, a whole fresh set of impeachment threats, and we can do it all again for another 4 years.
Here's hoping. But until then, we do have a lot of people that are still vying for the 2020 nomination to try and run up against the president. So let's talk about a couple of stories going on with there before we get into deep and dirty statistics. Now, the first story that I want to bring up is that Hawaiian Representative Tulsi Gabbard is getting set to sue Google at this point because they were suppressing her campaign ads and her campaign against everybody else's. Did you see any of this story?
Yeah, what I have to say here is Tulsi, welcome to the Republican Party. If you are not lockstep with what the Democratic Party wants to push, you're going to get cold shouldered and pushed out of everywhere. And the media, the Silicon Valley, um, the Hollywood circle. These you're not going to find any friends there. I don't think that her lawsuit is going to amount to anything at all. But I would just like to extend a friendly welcome to her and say, "Welcome to the party. Hope you like your stay."
I actually just sent out an email this morning to try and invite Tulsi onto this show and the other two that are associated with Freedom Scoop to, you know, it would be kind of nice to talk 2020 with somebody who's in the mix of it, but also to let
I
Steven
like
pick her brain.
Tulsi. I think she's one of the more interesting candidates, running, and I'm disappointed that she's not being taken seriously by the party and by the voters. I think that she actually has some fresh ideas. Uh, this year the theme is socialism, and that's not really what she preaches. So she's definitely behind the times there when it
Hmm.
comes to the Democratic Party. But Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard are definitely two of the more interesting candidates. and I wish they get more attention. And even on the debate stage, they get to say one or two words, and their poll numbers spike up. I wish more would happen for them because they're a lot more interesting than Beto O'Rourke and Cory Booker, Amy Klobuchar. So,
Well, the thing with Gabbard is, I mean, she stands opposed to the neoliberal line of let's go bomb every single brown country in the Middle East, and we need to go back into Syria, even though the president wants to pull us out. Hint, hint, will you finally do that? The answer is no. And that's the same thing with Yang. I mean, they've got these great Democrat ideas, and maybe Tulsi is the closest thing to a JFK Democrat that there is, but I mean, Yang is going to get kicked to the curb on this. I can't believe he's being allowed back into the debates right now because, yes, he's got this great idea to give money out to everybody, and it's a hugely socialist idea, but he wants to give that $1,000 to everybody. There's no preferential treatment to the protected classes. So, yeah, he's gone.
Andrew Yang's biggest two crimes are being wealthy and not being a career politician.
Mm-hmm.
I think for those two reasons, the Democratic Party leadership has no interest in giving him any kind of voice. And like you said, it is surprising that they're letting him come back. On debate number 2. And I have to imagine the only reason they're doing it is because of his universal basic income program that he's proposing. I think that they'd like to take that policy and Marianne Williamson's reparations policy and pull those into the new Democratic Socialist platform going forward. I think that that's really the biggest reason that they're still around, because their poll numbers are abysmal.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would love to see Marianne Williamson get to the end of that, but we'll talk about that in a little while.
I want her to be the nominee.
Yeah,
My
absolutely.
Goodness. Can we at least get vice presidential candidate Williamson? If we gotta have Biden or Warren and somebody, let's at least hyphenate it with Williamson.
Now, the next story that I want to talk about comes from Cory Booker over in New Jersey, who also should no longer be in the race at any point. Cory Booker went on the news this past week and said that he has to resist a testosterone urge to punch Donald Trump, which really seems to go against almost everything that the Democrat Party stands for, I would think, because...
All right, wait, whoa. Where are you getting that? Trump is a Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
We should punch Nazis. How do you get out of that we shouldn't punch Trump? That's like the staple of the Democratic policy right now.
Well, the testosterone aspect of it, of course.
This is okay.
Toxic masculinity.
This is Spartacus 2.0. So Cory Booker, he's doing absolutely horribly in any kind of numbers. Let me see here. He's behind Beto O'Rourke. He's behind Andrew Yang in polling numbers. He's at a measly 1.8% according to Real Clear Politics. That's his average. Cory Booker is fighting accusations that he's not interesting, that he's effeminate, and that he is not any kind of an actual strong, charismatic leader. And so in his mind, how do you counter all that? You say, well, man, let me tell you, the reason I come across like that is because actually on the inside, I am so charismatic, I am so energetic, and I have so much manly testosterone power inside me that it is only through, number one, attractiveness, and number two, my immense willpower, that I don't stand up there and punch that mean old Donald Trump right in the face. In his mind, this is the brilliant play that is should counter that. And maybe he's also looks at how many of the Democrats like Antifa, and so he's wants to borrow from their playbook as well. But I don't think anybody buys it. I don't think even he buys it. And this is exactly like when he stood up and called himself Spartacus. That nobody else praises him, so he has to praise himself. And the dude's just kind of a weird, kooky guy.
Yeah, that he is. I He's another one of those. We go back. We talked about Baltimore a little bit earlier. He's coming out from Newark, and rather than going and cleaning up his home, cleaning up his own house, he decided that he wants to go and try and clean up the rest of the country, or bring it down to Newark's level. And honestly, yeah, I think he should. I honestly, he should go back to being mayor if he thinks he can do so well and go clean up Newark. Show us how it's done. Wait, I'm
I'm
not
all
allowed to
for
say
it.
that, am I?
I'm well. You might be able to say it about him because he's a man, but he's not a white man. So again, we're in dicey territory. You're not allowed to say that again. I will say Cory Booker had the best reputation when he was a no nonsense mayor,
Hmm.
and it's kind of been downhill from there. He's definitely a lot less popular now than he ever was, and it's a bit of a shame because he was cool back then, and I think that he just really kind of lost who he was, and just embraced this kooky alter ego that he thought would be more popular with the country as a whole. And I don't see it paying off. And we can rate it a solid 1.8 because that's what he's getting in the polls.
Speaking of the polls and everything that's coming up, let's talk about the debates that are coming up because there are some people that we may want to see shuffled around into here. Some people who have bad ideas, some people have good ideas. So
Some people have good ideas.
let's talk about some of these key players in the Democrat Party that are going to be in this debate and some of the strategy that they should be bringing forward. Let's talk. Let's start with Tulsi because we both seem to enjoy her platform, and she had a really bad showing in the last debates. She had a little bit of a spike, of course, coming back, but she fell back off again. What do you think Tulsi should do coming into the debates and going through the debate?
What Tulsi really needed last time was what Kamala got. Kamala got 15 seconds of fame as, hey, I am no nonsense. I'm gonna challenge and take on Joe Biden. And I'm gonna just with some really good timing, I'm gonna try and seize the moment in a few key places and stand out. Tulsi didn't ever stand out, and when you are on such a crowded debate stage, you need to have people talking about you afterwards. And he had, for crying out loud, people were talking about Beto O'Rourke and his wacky, goofy attempt at speaking Spanish.
And Booker,
Heck,
don't forget Booker.
heck, that was something. That was something. Tulsi didn't have anything, and if she's going to gain any momentum, she needs to get confrontational with Biden and and with Kamala. Those are the only two people on the stage I think that matter at all if you are Tulsi. If you can draw some distinction between you and Kamala, maybe, and insert yourself as the third name that people should be taking seriously on issues, between Biden and Kamala. If she can draw some contrast between herself and Kamala, and maybe call Kamala out on some stuff, and at the same time really project herself as a rock solid leader, which nobody else on the stage really seems to want to do. I think if she can do that, then there's a chance as other candidates start falling off that she could pick up some of their percentage of the vote and pick up some speaking time.
What about Yang? What do you because there was the talk, of course, that Yang's microphone was cut off throughout the entire thing, only allowing him to speak when he had something that they wanted him to answer for. What does Yang do going into this debate? differently than he did in the last one?
I think that the only thing that Yang can possibly stand to benefit here is pick up some name recognition for 2024. I don't think there's any path for him to relevancy here. But if he can create some moments that people are talking about, then that might help him in 4 years or 8 years when people are first hearing about candidates they're starting to run again, and they can go, oh, Yang, he was the guy who said X and such in this moment. I think that's the only ground he stands to make up at all. I don't see any path forward for him at all.
So you think he's going to stand on the perennial candidate train?
He has to. It's an effective strategy. It's worked for other people in the past. I will say it's kind of the tack that Bernie Sanders was hoping to run this time, and really doesn't seem to have worked for him. Maybe because he's slowing down, but maybe because people took such note of him 4 years ago, and everybody started imitating his strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time it came around, now he was just the older person who was saying the same stuff everybody else was saying. So, you got to feel for Bernie a bit, because he definitely was ripped off in 2016. He really should have been the nominee. And I that ship has passed him by.
Well, let's shift gears for a second here and talk about the other end of the spectrum, the people that are up on the top. Now, there are a lot of people out there that say that Elizabeth Warren is already coronated, that she is the one that the DNC wants to go forward and to fight against Donald Trump in the debates and to become the president. But she is fluctuating in all of the poll numbers as we go along. She's had a steady rise, but she's never been able to move to the top. If she wants to make it to the top over Biden, what does Warren need to take into this coming debate? And I'm not trying to say endorse Warren and say what that you want her to get there, but if Warren wants to get to the top, what does she need to take into this?
It's very simple. This time, we got two debates again,
Mm-hmm.
and the two matchups that people are going to care about at all are Sanders and Warren, and Biden and Harris.
Mm-hmm.
And if Warren wants to be relevant and actually have a shot at Biden, she needs to finish off Bernie. Bernie Sanders has about 14% of the vote. Warren is like a half point ahead of him. And together those two candidates almost make up where Biden's sitting at right now. If Warren can knock Bernie out of the race, there's really good evidence from poll data that suggests that Sanders voters' number two preference is Warren. So if Elizabeth Warren can get Bernie to throw in the towel, then I think she has a clear shot at taking Biden head on. But Bernie's done. The question is, is Bernie going to give up early, or is he going to hang on and keep losing a percentage point here or there to different other candidates when it's too late for Warren to actually catch up to Biden? So if Bernie hangs in there all the way until we actually have some primary votes trickling in, at that point, I don't think that it really benefits Warren much at all. Not enough to make up lost ground on Biden and Kamala. But if she can knock out Bernie early on and solidify that head and shoulders lead ahead of Kamala, then you're looking a lot more similar to in 2016, when you had Trump and Cruz, definitely competing on a state by state level. Mm-hmm. At that point, I think you're right that Warren is the sort of the darling of the DNC and of the media. They definitely prefer her over anybody else. But it really probably is going to come down to Biden, Warren, or Harris. I don't think that anybody else is a really any kind of a serious player. But a judge is probably going to end up as a VP if Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris gets the nomination.
Well, and I don't think Bernie himself is really running a serious campaign either. I honestly put the tinfoil on my head and call me a conspiracy theorist. I think Bernie is just trying to take revenge over what happened to him in 2016, where he got bypassed and they coronated Hillary in his place. I think he's trying to pull some of that voter base off so they won't. So they'll either stay home or they'll vote for Trump out of spite for the person that got bypassed or that bypassed Bernie for the nomination.
I'm going to go the other direction.
What do you think?
I think that Bernie really just is out of touch enough. I mean, we've seen that he's already out of touch enough that he thinks that his socialist ideas are amazing. I think he's also out of touch enough to think that he actually has a shot at winning this. I think he's frustrated right now that he's falling behind in the polls, and you see some frustration on some other fronts as well, staffing, different media interviews he's doing. But I think he still believes he has a shot, and I think that even when he realizes he doesn't have a shot, I think he may still stay in a little bit in the hopes of, number one, continuing to push his agenda and his platform, and also he made a lot of money off of his first presidential run. I think that that call of maybe another book deal, maybe another 4 years or 6 years, sorry, in the Senate. I think these are some attractive benefits that he may stand to reap if he stays in the race a little bit longer.
Do you think he has another 6 years in the Senate?
Dude,
He's getting to that point.
This guy is a fossil, but he's fueled by insanity and greed. And I don't think that he's ever going to run out of those two motivations. I think he dies in office. I don't think he ever retires.
Last one on the debates that I want to touch on, you kind of touched on it a little bit before when you said the two matchups, is what does Harris do? What does she need to do in this debate going forward? And she had a pretty good showing out of the last one, but it was a flash in the pan moment, and she dropped almost immediately again. What does Kamala Harris need to do going into this debate?
So there's two points here. The first, I'll just answer your question, which is what does she need to do? She needs to surprise Biden, because Biden is going to come into this. She caught him off guard last time. She needs to do that again this time. This time, Biden is going to come in all practiced up and ready to punch at her, ready to swing at her with some attacks, ready to defend against what kinds of things he thinks she's going to bring at him. She needs to surprise him. If he can see her coming, I don't think she stands a chance. But if she can skirt around him and hamstring him again, then I think she has a real chance at continuing to chip away at his lead. The second point here is I think that after this debate, we'll have a really, really clear idea of who's going to be the nominee. Because if Biden survives debate number 2 against Kamala, I don't think that he's going to be taken down. If she can make him waver and stumble again, then I think you're looking at a real possibility of an Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris Democratic ticket instead of Biden. I think that debate number 1 was maybe a preview of what happens at debate number 2. Debate number 2, I think, is a preview of who the nominee is.
All right. We talked a lot about the RCP stuff, so I'm going to leave the visual aids out for this one. But before I always close 2020, there are 3 questions I started asking my guests since the last time you were on. Actually, I think I started when you were on the last time. I think that's where I formulated them, to be completely honest. But 3 questions that I always ask my guests. Number 1, Given the statistics that we have at hand this particular week versus what we've seen over past weeks, who do you think becomes the nominee for the Democrat Party, given the statistics we have right now?
Given statistics only, Biden.
You think Biden is the nominee right now?
At this point, he's trending upwards again. Has not lost a ton of ground since debate number one. He definitely stumbled after that, but he still has a really solid lead. I think where you've really seen the shakeup after that debate is who's occupying the second and third spots.
Well, and I mean, Styx has said some of that too in some of his videos. To quote Styx, there's never been a poll out there since before Biden was in where he was under fucking 20%, to quote him directly.
It's true, and if you look at the real clear spread, the lowest I've ever seen is Biden at +2. I've never seen anybody else take any kind of a lead, not since April. Back when Sanders was polling at within 5 points, and now Biden has twice as many points on average. You're looking at 30 to 32% versus 14% for Sanders.
Okay, my next question is if there is a situation out there where Trump can't be president for whatever reason, whether he strokes out on the campaign trail and Pence is not ready to run a campaign, or any other reason, you have to have one of the 25 people that are currently on the debate stage and on the consideration list for president. Which one do you pick to be the president next?
Out of the Democrats?
Out of the Democrats.
Okay, so I can't pick any Republicans.
No. Just out of the 25.
I'm going with John Hickenlooper. I think John Hickenlooper has a pretty good head on his shoulders. I don't mind Michael Bennet either. John Hickenlooper is left wing, but the left wing has shifted so far to the left that Hickenlooper is now considered pretty moderate. I don't hate his policies. I would be okay with President Hickenlooper for 4 years.
It just makes me think of one day when Brady Leonard said there's never going to be a President Hickenlooper.
No, there won't. But in all likelihood, I think probably none of the people on the stage here are going to be president. Come 2021. Maybe you get the bottom falls out of the economy, and Biden becomes president. But I think it's a long shot.
All right, last question. No statistics, no policy, no nothing like that. For pure entertainment value, which of the 25 candidates do you want to see as the nominee to go against Trump during the final stages of the campaign?
Oh, no question, Cory Booker. From a comedic, oh my gosh, I'd love to see Mr. Potato Head bring his angry eyebrows out and go all googly-eyed on Trump, and then hear Trump say something equally ridiculous back to him. I think there's a couple of people who would be fun. I think Bernie versus Trump would be a blast. I'm not sure I've ever heard the two guys talk to each other ever. I'm not sure they ever have interacted. And I think that I think you could have some fun with Pete Buttigieg as well, because he's got actually a very likable personality. And I think that he would be good at diffusing some of Trump's attacks in a way that Hillary and all of the Republican candidates from last time were unable to do. I think you'd have some fun there. But for entertainment value, I'm sorry. Cory Booker with his angry eyebrows and his ridiculous little daydreams about himself, you can't top it.
Not even the Biden-Trump push-up contest?
Dude, they both fall asleep before they got to the debate stage. These two old geriatrics would not even remember what the heck they were up there for by the time they got there. Although, let me say, out of all the matchups, I think that's probably the most likely one we're going to see is Biden versus Trump. So,
Yeah.
on a more serious note, we probably will get to see that, or maybe a Warren Trump debate.
Let's talk about Erica Thomas. Now, Democrat representative from Georgia's State District 39 caused quite a stir in the grocery store in which she claimed that a white man came up behind her, and this is in the wake of the Donald's tweets about go back to where you came from and all of the stuff that they tried to hang on that. This representative turned around and decided that she was going to cause a stir because this man told her to go back where she came from. Now, a lot of other things have come out about this, of course. We've seen people come out and say that she, in fact, went back to the gentleman and told him to go back where he came from. And he just called her lazy for the fact that she had too many items in the express line. One of the funniest things that came out of the story was that she had a press conference about all of this and the guy showed up. So, what all did you see about this?
So, as I like to call her, Justine Smollett. Although I am really hoping that at some point there will be some bit of news that'll come out where she walked into the legal trap that Jussie Smollett did, where he actually mailed the threat through the federal post and therefore made it an actual crime what he did.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see something like that happen, but there's two things. The first is it was fishy from the outset that a relatively prominent Democratic politician was the person that this supposedly happened to. You didn't hear any kinds of stories about this happening to regular civilians.
Mm-hmm.
So it was fishy from the outset. Then the guy, comes out and says, "Hey, a couple things. First of all, I'm a registered Democrat. Second, I'm not white. I'm Cuban American."
Mm-hmm.
So, you're. It's frustrating because we're seeing the exact same thing that happened in Covington, that happened a dozen other places, happened with Jussie Smollett, where this ridiculous, outlandish story comes out that makes conservatives look absolutely appalling.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as there's proof that it's fake and it didn't happen, the media are nowhere to be seen. They don't care at all because they operate in bad faith. They don't have any interest in, this actual news story, which is, hey, this representative lied, made this up out of thin air. They don't have any interest in that. They have an interest in pushing forward the narrative that they want. And so, this is, yes, it's a shame on Erica Thomas, but it's much more of a shame on these, so-called journalists who don't care at all about, retracting the story, issuing a correction, reporting on the fact that the whole thing is a lie. A lot of major news outlets have not taken down their stories or their tweets about, the incident happening in the first place, despite the fact that they're still getting shared and people are still hearing about the initial fake story. This is fake news, clear and through. It's fake news, and they don't care.
Well, let's have a look at one of the things that I found interesting about this. I've got a tweet sitting up on the screen right now. I don't have any sort of video share, so I can't show you, but I will read to you from it. Now, a lot of the reports came out and said that Erica had been tweeting about this and trying to double down on this, but when I went and I looked at her Twitter, the last thing that she had was from back on July 20th. And it reads, "So Eric Sparks admits to approaching me and verbally assaulting me in front of my 9-year-old, but not the rest of his statements. You sound like a coward to me, and that's fine. You will think twice before you berate anyone again. You keep lying. We have witnesses that will testify, in spite of the fact that we have witnesses that have testified the other way, almost saying that she was telling him to go back where he came from. But the worst part about this is this guy is a registered Democrat that has said that he would never go over to the Republican Party, and yet she seems to be doing everything that she can to try and drive him out.
Well, the grocery store had a recording.
Mm-hmm.
They have video surveillance of the incident. So please, by all means, Erica, drag this into the court. I would love to actually have the court order this evidence to be brought forward. Actually look into whether your claims hold any water at all. I'd love that. Please do it. But until then, she's following the Jussie Smollett strategy. Smollett still has never denied that any of it happened,
Mm-hmm.
or he's never admitted that none of it happened. There we go. And this is the new strategy by folks on the left is doesn't matter if you're caught, double down. That's what they always do now.
So, what does this do for race relations in our country? Because, I mean, before Obama came in, we were going into a place where we had really, really great race relations from what I could see everywhere that I went. And they've been kind of backsliding a little bit. But with the economy, I see that we're actually starting to get our race relations maybe back into place again. And now we have this happen, and I think this is going to set us back a little ways. But what do you think about that?
I don't know what to say. I don't think that this story hurts race relations a ton because the people who really whose minds were going to be changed by any of this, I think, are also going to care enough to follow up on the updates. I think that most of the people who just took it at face value, assumed it actually happened, and then never heard about the the new updates that prove that it's a lie. I think those people were already set in their mindsets anyways. So it's gross. It's a very low thing for her to have done. But no, I don't think that this changes things a ton. I think race relations were already not in an amazing spot. That certainly it differs, depending on where you go. You go to different areas and race relations are bad. You go to different places, though, just in middle America where a lot of your average people live, and race relations are fine.
Mm-hmm.
They're overall, they're not amazing, but they're not horrible either.
And I tend to agree with that to a point, but there is the point too, like, I'm not sure where you are in relation to a bigger city in Michigan.
Oh,
I
nowhere
live,
near any big cities.
yeah.
No, it's 99.999%. It's just straight white people where I live. Totally not a diverse area in the slightest. But I've also haven't lived here very long. I moved here 3 years ago.
Okay. Well, I mean, because I lived like right in Kenosha, right in one of the worst neighborhoods in Kenosha, and race relations at the time were before I moved to Massachusetts, they were kind of sketchy in the city. They seemed to be fine for the most part, but I mean, you could tell that there was still a little bit of prejudice out there, and there was definitely a difference. When I moved to Massachusetts, it seemed like it was just a completely different thing. And I was just outside of Boston, too. So the few black people that I met when I lived in Massachusetts, it was like there was no difference. They looked a little bit different and they talked a little bit different, but other than that, it was like talking to a completely the same kind of person you were talking to in any other concourse. Whereas what I've experienced from living in the inner city, they black people do sometimes tend to act and try and set themselves apart from the general white population, and if you don't act in a certain way, they try and say that you're not black enough.
I don't have a ton of you know experience with that. I do think that again, as with most things in life, it comes down to personal relationships. And if
Absolutely.
you have people that you actually care about, and that you interact with on a frequent basis, and have a relationship with. I think that that's the best thing for race relations is genuinely caring about each other and investing in each other's lives. And I don't think that the color of your skin is something that should impact that at all. But this the whole whether it's just Jussie Smollett or Erica Thomas, or a segue into our one of our next topics with the incident in Covington.
Mm-hmm.
The overarching issue here is the bad faith of the media.
Yeah.
They report on what they want to report on, and if the story changes, they don't report on the change because it doesn't fit with the narrative that they care about.
And that's something that I have noticed too. I mean, if you do go into things approaching them differently than if you go into a situation approaching an individual rather than a demographic, you find a
Mm-hmm.
lot of surprising things out there.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
But let's talk about the Sandman case since you brought that up here, because it appears now that Nicholas Sandman lost his lawsuit against the major media firms. And it looks like it was dismissed essentially on a technicality because, from the majority of it, most of the left leaning outlets that were smearing him were not saying his name, they were just plastering his face all over the place.
Yeah.
Therefore, they couldn't get hit for slander and libel.
Yeah, so for any listeners who are unfamiliar with what we're talking about here, so the story about the Covington kids, was getting spread everywhere by the media. They were calling these Covington boys, racists, and they were posting this picture everywhere of this teenage boy who
Mm-hmm.
was smiling, and I believe it was a Native American guy was in his face, kind of an older gentleman,
Mm-hmm.
and was angry, and this kid was just smiling at him. And the reaction was really gross because you saw a lot of people were commenting and saying something like, "Wow, have you ever seen a more punchable face than this 15-year-old kid or whatever age he is?" And the update comes out that the story is completely false, and that this kid who's just standing there grinning, he's not reacting, he's not engaging at all, and he's just standing there smiling while he's getting abuse and racial attacks slung at him. So his face is plastered everywhere by all these major media outlets, attached with headlines about racist kids.
Mm-hmm.
So he sues, these media outlets for, I believe, $250 million. Is that correct? I think it is. I think
Yeah.
he sued the Washington Post in particular. And so, yeah, as you say, the technicality was that they weren't using his name specifically. They were talking about the kids from his school and using his picture. And so, as you said, it's a technicality. And the reason that this gets thrown out is because nobody actually cares about what happened, because he's a privileged white boy, and this story of that none of this actually happened and that he actually is a victim. That's not interesting to the left wing. Presumably whatever legal team or whatever judge actually was involved in this decision. I really would have to imagine that it was a pretty biased conclusion that they reached. A cynical conclusion to toss it out on that technicality. So, you know, is there a huge story here? Not really. It's just the one foot in front of the other. It's the next footstep in what we've been talking about here about the bad faith reporting of the media, and they don't care who they trample.
Mm-hmm.
They all they care about is accomplishing their goals, pushing their messages at any cost. And hey, if you get to ruin this young white boy's life, that's just a bonus on top of this message.
Well, yeah, and I mean, he committed the high crime of wearing a Make America Great Again hat. But
Unforgivable.
the other side that I see about this when I look into this and I see what's going on with this is the fact that it is very hard at the point where the media has already made its spin on all of this to find a judge who's going to be impartial off of all of this. And I'm sure that the media firms went judge shopping when this was going to district court. I'm sure that if the lawyer for Sandman had gone judge shopping as well, we might have had this tried in a more conservative area, but none of this would have been partial anyway, and I don't feel comfortable with that idea in the least. This is
Well,
something. Go ahead.
there's an insane amount of money on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
The money and the political and social power that these media outlets have, extremely hard to fight against that.
Well, yeah, it's the other thing too. I mean, if this was found in Sandman's favor, who's to say that yeah, the media would have?
Forget re-election for that judge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Forget it. No, the Washington Post is going to go on an absolute vendetta, ruin that judge's reputation, and drag his name through the mud. And not one word of it has to be true. Why? Because none of it was true about Nick Sandmann.
Well, and it's the Washington Post, and they've suspended their ability to tell the truth, so none of it has to be true there either. Where democracy goes to die in darkness.
There you go. There you go.
Does this or can this go to the Supreme Court at this point? And does that change the outcome at all?
I mean, you need money. He'd have to find an individual or a group to back that effort. If this is going to go anywhere. So, could this go anywhere? Totally has to do with, and I'm also not a legal expert. So there's probably someone listening to the show here who, is aware of some rules here that I'm not, that would say no because of this technicality. It would be a good question, actually, for me to ask my aunt. She's a lawyer, and we had a conversation about the Covington kids back when it happened, and she was really interested. Excuse me, really interested in it. I should call her up and ask her what options they have here. She actually has argued in front of the Supreme Court before.
Well, and that's the thing too. I would be almost curious because of the profiling if a lawyer would be willing to almost take this pro bono or for a severe discount to get it up in front of the Supreme Court and get the recognition, especially given the makeup of the Supreme Court right now.
Hard to say. And the reason it's hard to say is because of my, lack of knowledge about the justice system.
But there again, that lawyer would also be standing up against the mainstream media, and that's not always the most profitable endeavor you've ever made.
No, and it's your reputation at that point would be tied to being a political figure. I think that you start looking at more of like a Rudy Giuliani figure after that, as opposed to just a lawyer. Maybe along the lines of a Robert Kardashian type of a figure.
All right, the last thing that I want to talk about today, and usually I wind up ending the show on a very dark note, which is why we do the hobby thing. But this is actually a little bit more lighthearted, and we get to poke fun at the other side for the way that they see the differences between men and women. This past week, an engineering student introduced a chair, and we'll see this here in just a second. This engineering student engineered a chair to try and stop the concept of manspreading.
Oh, thank God. I was worried that they were going to address something like hunger or, uh, cancer. Thank God that we've solved a non existent problem.
Well, she's come up with two different models of chairs that are for men and women, of course, because we don't have enough discrimination in our society. We suddenly have to have more discrimination going on into this. And that is the point of the chair. And it's, as you can see on the screen, it's got the men's version has ridges up on the side that it's shaped up into a V and it holds the man's legs together. And I don't know why he wouldn't just put his legs up over the side of it or go against this ridiculously low back, which the back of the thing just boggles my mind. I can't see any reason why that is comfortable for anyway, but that's not the
No,
focus of anything.
comfort is not the point of this chair.
No, absolutely not. But she's being
So,
praised about this because, yeah, it will.
well, of course she is. You do anything wacky enough for the left, and they will lay down and start licking your feet. This is absolutely the most genius idea I've ever heard for winning some arbitrary, uh, you know, left winger points. For here's what I want to know: who's going to invent the solution to stop women from putting their bags on the seats next to them? Because if man spreading is your legs go out like this, woman spreading is all your bags go on all the seats next to you. And the other thing that a lot of people have pointed out is that you frequently will see women they'll turn sideways, and put their feet up on the seat next to them. Do something like that.
Yeah,
Happens
absolutely.
all the time. Who's going to fix that problem? It's great that you've solved man spreading. What are you going to do about woman spreading, though?
Well, the interesting thing about this too, when you look at the chairs, is you've got the two of them on there, and I've got the image up there where you've got the men's chair, which is meant to hold the guy's legs together in a point where I'm hurting just looking at the thing. But then you've got the other chair with the notch in the front that's designed to let the woman do the spreading. So, what are we solving here? I don't understand this.
Well, it's not meant to actually solve a real life problem. It's meant to win a social battle and show men their place in the world. And by golly, you're gonna win some accolades from college professors by doing this. That's for sure. And boy, Fox.com and BuzzFeed, they are gonna eat this up.
Oh, they already have.
Well, congratulations to the inventor of the anti-man spreading chair on, I assume her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Upcoming offers from BuzzFeed and the like.
Do you think that she gets into MIT or anything like that, doing something like this?
Hey, stinking David Hogg got accepted, I believe, to Harvard. So
Yes.
the more you suck up to the left, the more it pays off for you.
I don't know. To me, this is just solving a non-problem.
That's what the left is best at.
And of course, because I mean, this is catering to women and trying to make them as comfortable as possible, but you're making men uncomfortable on mass transit, which is uncomfortable as it is. I mean, I don't
Well,
use much mass transit, but the little bit that I have used, it's an uncomfortable experience to begin with. There's a reason that Sheldon always said that he had bus pants on The Big Bang Theory.
I like the first part of what you said. Let's make public transport more comfortable for women. Let's also make it more comfortable for men. Spreading your legs, it's comfortable.
Hmm.
Let's get some cushier chairs with better support for your back and your neck. I'm all for it. Let's make everybody's lives better. But if you are one of the kooky left wingers like this, it's better to also make life worse for the men uh, on that path to making transportation more comfortable for everybody else.
And again, it's a situation that's not comfortable for anybody to begin with.
Here's what they really need to solve. You need to have like privacy screens so you don't have to be subjected as much to all the people around you on public transportation. You got the guy smoking, you got somebody who has, Ebola or something, and they're coughing, 2 seats over, and your skin is just crawling like, oh my gosh, what did I catch? Or you got there's the girl is on the phone with her boyfriend way too loud, and then you got the mom screaming at her kid, and the kid playing his iPad at max volume. Please, that's the problem you should be solving, is not subjecting us to the other people in these torture tubes.
Now, the little bit of mass transit that I have taken, and most of it involves, a bus going around Midway Airport, or I took the T one time going up into Boston from where I was living in Massachusetts. Those were all cozy experiences. They know how to set these things up right, but I mean, I see TV shows about New York where they're in the subway, and I already don't want to go to New York, but I don't want to use their mass transit after I see any of that either, because it is just horrible. People sleep there, people live in these train cars. It's
I have more than once, been exposed to public urination at bus stations. More than once.
Was alcohol involved?
Homelessness was involved in one of them for sure. It was a homeless lady. That was in Vienna. But yeah, it's not a one-time thing. It's happened a few times.
Well, I know people who've got busted for taking a leak behind the bar because they were drunk, but usually
Yeah, I
they're
don't know.
affluent when that happens.
Say what?
Usually they're quite affluent when that happens.
Well, when you have a lot of money, the only kind of trouble you really can get into is really stupid trouble. So that's that. If you're gonna end up, you're taking a leak behind a bar, and it happens that there's a school playground right next to it, and now you're a sex offender because you took a leak behind the bar.
Or the arresting officer's church.
Yep, which the judge also happens to go to.
The judge didn't go to the. One of my friends did that. The judge
Oh,
didn't
okay.
go to that particular church, but yeah, it was the arresting officer's church.
Yeah, there's at that point you just give up because when that's your kind of luck, just be careful because who knows what else is going to happen to you. But there you go, the anti-man spreading chair. Hooray! Thanks for inventing that.
Well, that's all I have here. So, what do you say we run through the outro?
Love it. Let's do it.
So, the last question I always ask all of my guests, of course, as you know, because you've been on this show before, is politics is such a depressing subject. It divides people, it divides families. So, I always try to end the show on a positive note. So, you as the guest, the most important part of Ed's world, please, JJ, tell us about a hobby that you have that has nothing to do with work or politics. It could be an album that you picked up, a new video game you've been playing, just something that helps you unwind at the end of the day.
Well, I'll say the only thing that is as divisive as politics is sports, and I'm a huge football junkie. But I've been reading this biography of Eisenhower by Stephen Ambrose. It's called Soldier and President, and really enjoying it a lot. It's I've read quite a few presidential biographies at this point. I think I most enjoyed reading about Nixon, but John Adams was also a great one. This is an interesting biography of his. I really just started it. I'm not very far in at all, but He's definitely a fascinating president, and haven't gotten a lot of reading time in lately, so I'm kind of enjoying a chance to kick back and get my nose into some pages here.
Well, that's what I have here. And I want to thank the audience for watching the show thus far. If you want to continue the conversation with me, you can do so right down in that comment section below us, or you can find me over on Twitter. That is at edsblog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Or you can reach out to me on email. That's edsblogtwitter@gmail.com. If you want to finish the conversation with our guest JJ here, JJ, tell us where they can find you.
Follow me on Twitter at JJ Lahey, Lahey. I'm happy to answer questions or banter about sports, and I definitely always enjoy poking fun at politicians and celebrities who are being stupid. So that's the conversation is over at Twitter.
And that will be linked in the description below as well. And if you're going down to check that description and get that link, make sure you hit that like button on your way and that subscribe button if you're not already there. We welcome likes and subscriptions on YouTube and over on BitChute, where you can find us just in case anything should happen to YouTube. We are also on audio platforms iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. If you're listening back and you like what you hear, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that 5-star rating and a good review if you're over on iTunes. That really helps us move up the algorithms. Ed's World is proudly partnered with the Freedom Scoop Media Group. Remember, you can find my show over there. You can find The Generational Gap over there. You can find Stephen Ignoramus's 3 various shows all over there. And we are openly casting for writers right now. If you are interested in writing for Freedom Scoop, or you know somebody who would be interested in writing on a political forum, please reach out to me. That is edsblogtwitter@gmail.com. I'll ask a few questions and I'll get you or the person that you're interested in writing a sample article or sample subject to write about, and we'll see what makes the cut. Remember, as always, we say on this program, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. JJ, you have last word.
Hey, I just want to say thank you for having me on here again, and I want to just encourage anybody who's listening here. There's a lot of political divisiveness, and in my opinion, the best way that you can help counter that is to just be a friend, just be be a force against the division and the hatred, and there's not any reason to let politics separate you. So the personal relationships and caring is always the first and best defense that we have towards reunifying our country. So just want to encourage everybody about that.
Thank you for that, and take care, everyone.